Come in, dear, I've just the story for tonight.
The letter arrived on a Monday, though Elena couldn't remember what day it had been when she first opened it. Everything since had blurred into that same overcast gray. The envelope was yellowed at the edges and bore a faded wax seal with no crest. Inside, a single sheet of paper in elegant, almost delicate cursive. The property at 13 Loden Lane is now yours. Come at once. Some things cannot wait. No signature. No sender. No return address. Just that whisper of a message she'd tried and failed to ignore. Now, as her rental car crunched slowly up the gravel drive, Elena saw the house again for the first time in 20 years. It was worse than she remembered. The stone was mottled with moss and age. The wooden slats of the porch bowed inward like ribs. A half-dead tree leaned over the roof as if eavesdropping. The sky pressed low, full of slate clouds that never quite broke open. She turned off the engine but didn't move. For a moment she sat still, both hands clenching the wheel. This place was buried deep, a scar tucked beneath years of displacement and denial. She hadn't set foot here since she was 11. It shouldn't have still existed. Yet here it was, unchanged. Elena stepped out and slammed the car door behind her with more force than necessary. The air smelled like mold and iron. At the base of the porch steps, the stone lion statues remained, though one had lost its jaw and the other had a hairline crack through its eye. The key was under the third step just as before. Pulled. Heavy. Waiting. Inside, the house exhaled must and secrets. Every surface was dusted in a fine layer of abandonment. The wallpaper curled like peeling skin. The chandelier above the foyer swayed slightly, though the air was still. Her boots echoed as she crossed the hardwood floor. It moaned under her weight. She paused at the base of the stairs. Her eyes flicked to the left, toward the narrow hallway leading to the kitchen, then to the right, and then downward. The basement door stood ajar. That wasn't right. She stepped closer. The door creaked on rust-bitten hinges as she nudged it open. The wooden stairs descended into darkness. Not shadow but true absence. She hadn't even remembered the basement until now, but the sight of it made her skin ripple. There was no light switch. There never had been. It was said that memory fades with time. But what had waited below had never faded. If anything, it had sharpened in the silence. She closed the door. Hard. Upstairs, the rooms were just as she remembered. The stained glass window on the landing still fractured the afternoon light into blood-colored shards. The hallway floor dipped near the end, where once her brother had pushed her down in a game that wasn't quite a game. The nursery door was still locked. It had always been locked. Elena dropped her bag in the master bedroom and opened the curtains. The garden below was choked with weeds, the wrought iron fence tangled in brambles. Beyond that, forest. Not thick, but dense enough to conceal anything that didn't want to be seen. She looked up at the ceiling. A dull thump echoed once, as if something heavy had shifted. Not above. Below. No. She wasn't going to entertain that. She unpacked. She showered. She opened a bottle of wine she'd bought for exactly this purpose, to drown out the house's breath. But it was when she returned to the living room that she noticed the change. The door to the basement was closed. She hadn't touched it. She hadn't gone near it. There was no wind. No draft. And yet, her skin tightened. She stared at the door for a full minute. Then another. Then, shaking her head, she turned away. That night, as the old pipes ticked and the radiator clanked, Elena dreamed of footsteps, slow and wet, slapping across cold concrete. She woke to silence. Until it came again. A whisper. Barely a sound. Less than breath. But she'd heard it. It had said her name. Not Tomasini. Not Mississippi. Not you. Wine. The second night was worse. Elena had managed a single hour of uneasy sleep before the noises began again. Low, irregular tapping like someone knocking inside the walls, searching for the weakest point. At first she tried to rationalize it. Old pipes. Settling timber. maybe even possums. But deep down she knew that sound. It had started in childhood, those rhythmic knocks below her bed or sometimes from behind the wardrobe. Her mother had said it was her imagination. Her father had muttered something about mice. But even as a child, Elena remembered freezing with her blanket over her head, knowing it wasn't mice. Mice didn't whisper. She wrapped her dressing gown around herself and padded down the stairs, flashlight in hand. The silence between each step was thick, like the house was holding its breath. When she reached the kitchen, the knocking stopped. Then came the whisper. Faint. So faint she would have missed it if the refrigerator hadn't clicked off at that very moment. A single word exhaled into the room behind her. Elena. She spun around, light cutting through dust. The hallway to the basement door stretched behind her like a throat. The whisper hadn't come from the basement. It had come from the walls. The sound returned, this time from inside the ceiling. Then from the floor. Then, unmistakably, from the living room. Her flashlight flicked. Just once. But it was enough. She didn't go back to bed. By morning the sun offered no comfort. Elena sat in the kitchen, clutching her coffee like it could anchor her to reality. She hadn't slept. The knocks had come and gone all night. Never consistent, never from the same place twice. She needed answers. Dragging a wooden chair from the kitchen to the hallway, she propped it beneath the attic hatch. The old ladder groaned under her weight, each rung an accusation. She hadn't been up here since she was 11, when her father had finally nailed the hatch shut after she swore something had been watching her from the corner. She forced it open now with a loud crack. Dust fell like ash onto her shoulders. The attic smelled of dry wood, old paper, and something else, metallic and sweet. A single box sat in the center of the crawlspace. Wrapped in waxed paper and tied with twine, the box bore her name in her mother's handwriting. Not Ellie, the name only friends had called her. Elena. Formal. Deliberate. Inside she found two things. A cassette tape labeled "Play Only Once" and a folded sheet of yellowing graph paper. She unfolded it with trembling fingers. It was a floor plan of the house, but wrong. Extra rooms where there shouldn't be any. A stairwell that didn't exist. And scrawled across the basement in red pencil. Don't go below. He remembers you. Elena didn't own a cassette player, but she found one in the living room, her father's, caked in dust and battery acid. After cleaning the terminals and feeding it new batteries, it whirred to life with a static hiss. A woman's voice filled the room. Come. Tired. Her mother's voice. If you're hearing this, I'm sorry. We should have left the house to the ground. But your father insisted it might sell one day. Foolish hope. Elena, sweetheart, you were right. It was real. All of it. Elena sat down, heart hammering. It came for your brother first. He talked to it. Thought it was a game. But it was never a game. We heard him whispering at night. Then, one day he stopped talking altogether. She remembered. She hadn't thought about Daniel in years. He died in an accident, hadn't he? A fall. That's what they told her. But something shifted in her memory like a dislocated joint. We locked the basement for a reason. It's not just a room, Elena. It's a mouth. And it never stops wanting. If you open the door again, it will remember you. It remembers everything. The tape ended with a soft click. No goodbye. Just silence. And then another knock. This time from the floorboards directly beneath her. She stared at the basement door the rest of the day. It had been repainted many times over the years. Layers of white, then brown, then cream. But the outline of the old lock remained, like a healed wound that still remembered the pain. There was no key. Only a tarnished knob and a single rusted hinge at the top that groaned if you even looked at it wrong. Elena didn't want to go down there. Every cell in her body recoiled from the thought. But the whispers were getting bolder. Calling her name more clearly now. Sometimes laughing. Sometimes imitating the voice of her mother. Or her brother. She waited until the sun began to set, thinking maybe the dark would give her courage. It didn't. But it did make the whisper louder. Elena. This time it came from inside the basement door. She stepped forward, barefoot on the cold tiles, holding the flashlight tight enough to hurt her knuckles. The door opened on its own. No creak. No fanfare. Just a quiet, slow swing into darkness. The stairs descended steeply, far steeper than she remembered. The air was thick, humid, and tasted of mildew and iron. The smell of the earth beneath the house. She took one step down. Then another. Then the whisper changed. It didn't say her name. It laughed. A slow, deliberate chuckle that came not from below, but from behind her. She turned and saw the basement door slam shut. Elena didn't scream when the door slammed. She stood on the third stair down, heart pounding, eyes locked on the thin seam of light where the door had been. There was no handle on this side. Only cold brick wall sweating with damp. She turned slowly, facing the basement proper. And there it was again. The sound of breathing. Not hers. Not shallow or fast like panic. No. Slow. Deep. Wet. Deliberate. It echoed from below, rising from the unseen base of the stairs like a fog made of sound. Each inhale was like someone dragging a sodden coat through a gravel pit. Each exhale like steam escaping a cracked pipe. It was breathing, waiting. She lifted her flashlight and stepped downward. The staircase ended abruptly after 12 steps, opening into a basement that had changed. She remembered a cluttered space, dusty tool benches, boxes of old books, rusting paint tins. But now the room was empty. Hollow. Only the floor and the walls remained. And those were not as she recalled. The stonework looked older than the house itself. Irregular blocks mortared in some long-forgotten style. Damp vines threaded through the mortar like veins, pulsing slightly when her light swept over them. The flashlight flickered again. And in that brief darkness the breathing stopped. When the light returned, she wasn't alone. At the far end of the room stood a figure. It hadn't been there before. It couldn't have been. But now it stood tall and narrow, its shape partially obscured by shadow. No details. Just a vague outline, like something drawn in pencil and then erased imperfectly. It didn't move. Didn't speak. But the air around it pulsed, and Elena felt the wrongness like pressure behind her eyes. She stepped backward, one foot up onto the stair, and the figure tilted its head. Not much. Just enough. Just enough to acknowledge. She turned and bolted up the stairs. The door was gone. Not locked. Not jammed. Gone. Where the door had once been was now unbroken brick wall, same as the rest of the basement. Seamless. Thought. No, she whispered. No, no, no. Something moved behind her. Not a footstep. Not a breath. Something softer. The sound of cloth dragging across stone. She turned her flashlight again, but the figure was gone. So was the rest of the room. Now she stood in a hallway. Stone walls stretched in both directions, narrower than any hallway had a right to be, the ceiling just inches above her head. The stairs were gone. The basement was gone. The house was gone. The only thing that remained was the light in her hand, and the pressure building in her chest. And the laughter came from ahead. A dry, childish giggle that repeated once, twice, then fell silent. She walked. She didn't remember choosing to, but her legs moved. Her flashlight picked out details in the stone, scratches like claw marks, old nail heads driven into mortar, and symbols drawn in wax. Circles. Triangles. An eye. Her name was written once. Scratched in what looked like chalk. Then again. But misspelled. Then again Eleanor. Then again. And again. 100 versions of her name, scrawled along the wall like a child's frantic attempts to remember how to spell it. Some backwards. Some in blood. Her breath caught. Something whispered behind her. Come see. She broke into a run. The hallway bent and turned, always too narrow, always just sharp enough to scrape her arms. Her flashlight flickered, steadied, flickered again. Ahead a faint red glow appeared, dim and pulsing like embers in fog. She emerged into a circular chamber. At its center stood a basin filled with liquid that steamed and shimmered like oil. Around the walls more writing. But these weren't names, they were memories. Written like entries in a diary. Some hers. Some not. I told Daniel to go into the basement. I was angry. I didn't mean it. I didn't mean it. He begged me not to close the door. I closed it anyway. Elena stared at the words, her stomach hollowing. She hadn't remembered this. Not clearly. Not until now. A shape stirred beneath the surface of the basin. The liquid trembled. Then rose. First a hand. Then an arm. Then a face. Half her brother. Half something else. Eyeless. Open-mouthed. Grinning. Ellie, it said with no breath. You never said sorry. Elena stumbled back, dropping the flashlight. It rolled, light spinning across the chamber, casting long shadows. The face in the basin rose further, its form stretching like tar. "I didn't know," she gasped. "I was a child, I didn't." The grin widened. "You did." The chamber trembled. From the walls, hands reached out, child-sized, small, grasping. From the basin, the figure stepped forward. No longer Daniel, but something built from her guilt. A shape constructed from every terrible thought, every buried memory. It didn't speak again. It didn't need to. Elena ran. Back through the hallway, through the dark, deeper and deeper into corridors that should not exist. No direction. No logic. Just turns upon turns upon turns. Until the door. Wooden. Bolt. With a brass knob. She threw it open and found herself back in the kitchen. The light was different. Morning sunlight filtered through the windows. But the house was silent. Unnaturally so. The refrigerator didn't hum. The walls didn't tick or settle. Outside the window the world looked off, like a photograph slightly out of focus. Elena walked through the house. Everything was in its place. Except her reflection. When she passed the hallway mirror, she didn't cast one. She stared. Touched her face. Looked down at her hands. They were wrong. Not aged. Not scarred. Smoothed. Flattened. Like a shadow burned into reality. And then, from the basement door now closed again, she heard someone knock. Elena did not answer the knock. She stood frozen, a breath caught in her throat like glass. One knock. Then silence. She backed away from the basement door. Her mind reeled. He was back in the house, but changed. The lights were on, but the shadows didn't fall correctly. The mirror showed nothing. And the door. The door waited. She ran. Out the front door, down the stone path, out into the overgrown field where she'd parked. The car was gone. No tire tracks. No sign she'd ever driven in. Only a blank stretch of pale grass and mist and silence. She turned. The house was gone. Or no, still there. But different. It sat sunken into the ground, weathered and worn like it had aged 50 years in a single breath. The shutters hung crooked. Ivy overtook the eaves. One of the windows was cracked, webbed like broken ice. Smoke rose from the chimney, but it was black and thin and carried the sharp scent of burnt wax. And the door was open. Not the front one. The basement. Elena stepped backward, but the grass shifted beneath her, tugging slightly at her shoes. Each blade of grass seemed to move on its own, as though reaching. As though welcoming. Behind her the mist thickened. Something moved in it. She could hear the rustle of feet, bare, slow, dragging across the earth. A voice whispered, "She came back. She came back." She turned and ran for the house. The basement door was still ajar when she reached it. A single dim bulb flickered above the stairs, casting a cone of amber light that barely pierced the gloom. Her flashlight was gone, lost in the dream hallways below. But the door wasn't waiting anymore. It was open, and the breathing had returned. Only this time it was hers. Shallow, fast, frantic. She descended. The air was thicker now, not just with damp but with weight, like something pressed down from above. The stairs felt longer, steeper. She counted 13 steps. Then 14. Then they ended. The basement was different again. Now it resembled a study, her father's from when she was a child. But impossibly skewed. The bookshelves leaned at angles, the spines blank. The desk lamp cast no shadow. And on the desk sat an object she hadn't seen since she was 9. A brass bell. Small, tarnished, cracked at the base. Her mother had thrown it away after the accident. But here it was. Ringing. Without sound. He touched it and the room changed. The walls dropped away like stage curtains, revealing rows of shelves that stretched endlessly into dark. Each shelf lined with boxes. Old shoeboxes. Cookie tins. Wooden crates. She opened one. Inside, a strip of film flickering between frames. Her and Daniel. In the backyard. Laughing. She opened another. A single sock. Bloodstained. Tiny. Another. A cassette tape labeled "Don't Listen" in her own handwriting. The objects were fragments. Of lives. Of memories. She wasn't alone here. This was a place where the past was stored. Where the worst moments were kept. Where the forgotten things waited to be remembered. A figure stepped between shelves. Not Daniel. Not her father. Not even the thing that had risen from the basin. This one was blank. Featureless. Like a silhouette of a person cut from paper and glued into the world. It faced her. Then pointed down. There was a trapdoor beneath her feet. Had it been there before? It was open. Elena dropped into the dark. No fall. Just arrival. She stood in the crawl space beneath the basement. A place she didn't know existed. No walls. No ceiling. Only a field of dirt under her feet and rows upon rows of beds. Iron hospital beds. Each one occupied. But not by people. Each bed held a shape. Under a white sheet. Motionless. Some tall. Some small. Some curled in fetal positions. She walked between them, afraid to lift a sheet but unable to stop. Each bed had a tag tied to the footboard. Name, unknown. Debt, paid. Remarks, incomplete. At the end of the room stood a mirror. She hadn't seen herself in hours. She stepped forward. And found that it wasn't a mirror. It was glass. A window. And something stood on the other side. It looked like her. But not. Its face was slightly wrong, too symmetrical. Its eyes too black. Its smile too wide. It tilted its head, like the thing in the first basement. Then it tapped on the glass. Soft, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. Elena tried to step back. But her feet would not move. The tap became a knock. Then a pound. Cracks spread through the glass. Hairline at first. Then jagged. Then chatter. The thing stepped through. And Elena ran. Through the rows of beds. Past the boxes of memory. Up unseen stairs. Into the hallway. Through doors that had never existed. The house folded around her. Rooms rearranged. Stairs doubled back. And behind her, always just behind her, came the thing with her face. She reached the attic. A single bulb swung from the rafters. Dust floated like mist. And there, in the center of the room, sat a child's toy tea set. Porcelain hand-painted. 2 cups. 2 saucers. And in the smaller chair, Daniel. Still 8 years old. Unchanged. He looked up at her with solemn eyes. "You left me," he said. Elena fell to her knees. "I didn't know. I swear. I didn't know what would happen. You locked the door." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I was scared." "I was too," Daniel said. And vanished. The floorboards opened beneath her. He fell. Not into darkness. Into her own bedroom. Present day. Morning sun outside the window. The house. Normal. Elena sat up in bed, drenched in sweat. A dream. A terrible dream. A knock at the door. She rose, hands shaking, and opened it. Daniel stood there. Same solemn eyes. "You came back," he said. And the house exhaled. By the time Elena reached the basement door, the rest of the house had stilled. No more groaning pipes. No tick of the grandfather clock. Just the muffled beat of her own heart. Her hand hovered over the rusted handle, the old wood splintered and swollen with age. The hallway behind her pulsed like a lung. She opened it. The stairs yawned downward into perfect black. She didn't bring a flashlight this time. She didn't want the illusion of control. Each step creaked like it remembered who she was. There were 13 steps. She had counted them 100 times as a child, her feet dangling just above the final one, daring herself to jump into the dark. But tonight she counted them differently. Fully. Reverently. A breath curled from the void below, wet, ragged, as if exhaling a century of dust. She stepped down. The basement smelled the way memory rots. Damp concrete. Old iron. The faintest trace of soap from her father's tools. That was the worst part. It had tried to keep these things, her mind told her, like a predator crafting bait from what he used to love. And then she heard it. Not the whispers from before. This was a low hum, almost felt more than heard, like tension in a wire. She turned toward the far wall where the old shelving unit had collapsed years ago. Except it hadn't. It stood upright. Impossibly. Its shape wrong in the darkness, taller than she remembered, broader. And something behind it was breathing, not in and out, but in only, drawing air into itself endlessly. Elena. Her name again. The voice was wrong. Not her father's. Not her mother's. Not anyone she had ever known. But it spoke as though it had always known her. She stepped forward. Her boots sank slightly into something spongy. She didn't look down. She had seen enough basements. Her eyes adjusted just enough to notice movement, shadows curling not from but toward a point behind the shelf. The whispers returned. But they weren't memories now. They were promises. We can take it away. The grief. The guilt. The house. Your name if you'd like. She staggered, pressing her back against the wall. Cold bit through her sweater like she'd stepped into winter. No, she said aloud. You don't want to help me. The shelf rattled. A hand reached out from behind it. It was not a hand. Elena saw too many joints. The fingers were long, wet, and seemed to be made of shadow and bone. They tapped the shelf once. Tap, 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 and then paused. Another hand joined it. Then a face. Oh, not a face. Something using the idea of a face. Smooth where it should have had features. A hint of a smile etched into the wrong place where no mouth should be. Eyes just hollow depressions that bled smoke. Elena backed up. It followed her. I came back, she whispered. I came back, didn't I? The shape halted. The smile widened, though it did not move. Yes, it whispered. But you never left. The hum intensified. The walls of the basement warped. The concrete grew moist, organic. Something pulsed behind her. Elena turned to flee, but the stairs were no longer stairs. Just more darkness folding in on itself like wet paper. She ran forward instead. Into the dark. And the basement opened. She woke on the floor. Morning light streamed through a crack in the foundation wall. Her clothes were dry. Her body, unharmed. But the basement was wrong. Too small. Just the broken shelves and damp floor and rusted boiler. No handprints. No breath. No shadow that shouldn't be. She stood, bones aching, and made her way up the stairs. The house had returned to silence. Elena reached the kitchen and opened the door to leave. She stepped outside and stopped cold. The trees were wrong. The sky was wrong. Above her, the clouds swirled counterclockwise in impossible motion. The sun was too still. A red train horn echoed in the distance, even though there hadn't been tracks here for decades. A soft voice whispered in her ear, not from the house, but from inside her. You came back. You stayed. Remember. She didn't scream. She simply closed the door behind her, walked back inside, and lit the stove.
Such a terrible thing to happen, don't you agree? Until next time, then.